It's lights out, everybody, and welcome back to the Low Downforce podcast, the four-friend Formula One podcast. And you have the three musketeers, it's just the lads. J9 got her wisdom teeth out, and what is worse for your mouth and your jaw than talking on a podcast? Although we will miss her because there's some very Mercedes-relevant stuff to talk about. Of course, this is the Spanish Grand Prix review after the race weekend in Barcelona. We obviously mentioned in our preview that one of the big talking points was the technical directive, the stiffer front wings. Would it change anything? Maybe. We don't know. Do we ever really know for certain? But there's still so much to talk about after this Grand Prix weekend. So getting right off the bat, Matt, we're going to jump to you first. Race rating. How'd you feel about it?
I was like between a 7.5 and an 8. There was some action to be had, but at the end of the day, it wasn't like anything out of this world happened. Maybe I'm being a little bit conservative with that rating, but no, I mean, it was a good race.
I'm going to give 2 ratings. If you rate the first 60 laps, it was like a 2. This race was so boring. But if you count the last 6, I'm giving those like a 9. The last 6
you
laps
gotta
are
bump
like the
that
only...
up. Last 6 might have been like a 15 or a 20. But I'm right there with you. I gave it an 8. And I think I mentioned the technical directive because I think if we don't have that storyline, is McLaren still going to be on top? Is the order going to shake up? I think without that, it might have been a 6.5, a 7. Obviously, like you said, Josh, there was definitely strategy involved in this race. We saw teams, It wasn't one stops. We saw teams debating if they wanted a 2-stop or 3-stop. And that was before, spoiler alert, the crazy safety car at the end that came out that changed everything. But yeah, once that happened, that elevated everything. It was so worth the beginning of the race to get that last little bit. And so amid all the chaos, McLaren, we talked about the technical directive, stays on top. Oscar gets the win. Lando Norris right behind him. And then Charles Leclerc makes the late surge for the podium. George Russell stays in 4th after some pretty notable contact we'll talk about after he got hit by Max Verstappen, who went all the way from P5 to P10 with a penalty right at the end of the race. And then the other top guys notable, Nico Hülkenberg, top 5 finish, P5, his best finish since 2019 at Renault. You've obviously got Lewis Hamilton in 6th just behind him. Isaac Hadjar, again, another rookie performance. Pierre Gasly gets Alpine back into the points in 8th. Fernando Alonso scraps up his first points of the season in 9th at his home race. And we mentioned Max in 10th. But those are just the numbers. That's just the stat sheet. It doesn't tell everything, so we got to kick it right back to you, Josh. There's certainly a lot to talk about.
Yeah, mentioned Max's penalty. Ollie Behrman also got a 10-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, which landed him in 17th, which was last of the finishers. Alex Albon retired after 27 laps, had 2 broken wings, and it just was not worth them driving the rest of the race. And then Antonelli had an issue with the car after 53 laps, caused a safety car to come out, and that led to all the drama. And
before we get into the drama, the one other thing worth noting, there's only 19 drivers driving this race.
That's what I was about to say.
Lance Stroll started to cut you. Actually, I'll let you take it. You were building up for it. You got it.
Yeah, I had mentioned Ollie Behrman 17th, only 2 retirees. Lance Stroll had some wrist pain, so he had a procedure done and didn't compete in the race at all. But this was after qualifying, so they couldn't fit in a new driver to replace him for the race. So Lance Stroll out the race before his home race in Canada.
Yeah, so he's getting a procedure done on his wrist. So if you remember, if you've been following Formula One a little bit, Lance Stroll had a bike crash just before the beginning of the 2023 season a couple years ago. Broke a couple toes, but most notably broke his wrist and had to have surgery for it. And then to everybody's surprise, 12 days after surgery, raced in the season opener in Bahrain. Very quick recovery time. We know, obviously, these are multimillionaire athletes. They have access to, physician resources that none of us have. But even still, 12 days is a pretty quick time to come back, especially when you need your wrist to turn the car. And that is a very important part of the job. Apparently, he's experiencing pain stemming from that. And so now we don't know, as Josh mentioned, Montreal is his home race. It's the next race. And the way the schedule falls, this is one of the larger gaps in the season. He'd only miss one race. He could be back in 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks for the next race after that, which is Austria. But now Lance Stroll is at very high risk of missing his home race, which probably feels really not good for anybody. You always want to perform well in front of your home fans.
He wasn't going to perform well in that car anyways.
Hey, I mentioned, though, Fernando Alonso.
Is it about the car?
Probably not.
I have a theory, though, as to why they made the decision now and it's not time related. So thinking about Barcelona, thinking about this track, it's got a little bit of everything. It used to be the preseason test track, so it's a very diverse, very involved track. But one of the things I really noticed watching all of the sessions this weekend is there are some really long, fairly high-speed turns where you have to hold the wheel in a turned position for quite an extended period of time, multiple times throughout this track. It's hot, all of that. Part of me thinks that it might even be the track characteristics of having to rotate his wrist more than maybe he normally does on other tracks that, maybe it bothers him a little bit every weekend, but it just, by the end of qualifying, it just got out of control. He just wasn't able to do it because, like you mentioned, the rule in Formula One is you can only replace a driver in the race or for the race if they have competed in a session earlier that weekend. So because they withdraw Lance Stroll after qualifying, Felipe Drugovich, who's been waiting in the wings as Aston Martin's reserve driver for 3 or 4 seasons now, he doesn't get a chance to compete, even though he's right there in the garage, because he didn't go out for a practice session. He didn't go out for a qualifying, but it also makes you wonder, like Aston Martin, mentioned that this is like an ongoing thing. I feel like they should have known, even throw him in the car for FP1 and get one of your, young driver sessions out of the way. Or if it got bad on Friday, throw him in for FP3 just to get that opportunity. Because now, and albeit Aston Martin not often competing for points this year, but you completely shut yourself out of a chance at points when you really need them this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that, even Lance, who's not my favorite driver by any means, you don't want to see anybody injured. But it is worth questioning. Why not, again, to your point, just put in Drugovich for the practice session? It's not like Lance came up and said at the end of qualifying, guys, this has never happened before. What's going on? I don't know. It's not a new injury. So it begs to question just what the team was thinking, but hopefully Lance heals soon.
Yeah, hopefully he feels better. We'd love to see him in Canada.
Yeah.
That we would. Of course, Josh and I will be there, and we are ready for it. But we almost would be going to Montreal without the ability of seeing Max Verstappen in the flesh because we haven't even gotten to the key drama of the race.
Yeah, so after that safety car that Antonelli had, everyone boxes, as they always do, put on new tires. Everyone's on softs at the top of the field except for Max Verstappen, who's in third, pits for hards. And he comes out of the pits and he pushes the radio button and he says, what tire is this? And they're like, you're on the hards, Max. And
I love how they
Max,
don't know. Like, they can't just, look out to the side and see their tires.
Well, yeah,
Does
I think
the
you
inside
could feel
of-
it a little bit.
Does the inside of the tire even say?
No, that's the thing.
No, it has the stripe on it, I think.
Are you
still.
sure? I'm pretty sure the marking is only on the outside. Like, I truly think the driver does not know what tire they're on unless they're told.
So what is interesting, I actually went back and I watched from when the safety car started through the end of the race of just Max's team camera and listening to his radio. And he said after the safety car, before pitting, he's like, what tires do we have available? GP didn't answer him at all. And then as he was about to turn in the pits, he said, box. He did say any new tire would be better. But then he ended up on a hard. After the safety car restart, he's on a hard. Tires aren't up to temperature. Has a little snap. Catches the car, but Charles runs past him. They have a little bit of contact. George Russell is coming up behind him. They have a tiny bit of contact too. They drive, do like a lap or two. Uh, Red Bull pit wall tells Max to give the position back to Russell. He's like raging in the car. His radio is
He was
hilarious.
pissed. Red mist for sure.
Yeah. Then he slows down like he's going to give Russell a position. Russell starts to go ahead, and then Max just goes straight on the throttle and drives directly into the side
It could
of
have
George
been
Russell.
so much worse too. So because George is turning in for the beginning of turn 5, and Max just literally accelerates straight into the side of him. But they wind up banging wheels. George comes on the radio that he suffers a little bit of damage, manages to keep his position on the track because he only has a couple more laps before the checkered flag. But if Max accelerates like that and makes contact with George's car 3 feet forward or 3 feet back, he's either taking an entire front wing off or just straight punching a hole like in the side pod, T-boning George Russell. Like it was
probably
bad.
Both of their races.
I mean, it was bad because it looks very intentional. Like
it has to be.
I don't know
and
how
he came out and apologized on Instagram, which makes me think
well, he didn't even really apologize. He just said it shouldn't have happened. I'm sorry it doesn't show up anywhere in his statement. But I mean, like it's very obvious. It's pretty slam dunk that this is an intentional crash, and it could have been so much worse. It could have been dangerous. There could have been injuries, but
I'm surprised he only got a 10-second penalty. Everyone, I feel like online is saying, like Russell got a worse penalty in Monaco for just leaving the track and getting an advantage, which is obviously much less dangerous, having to do the drive-through there. So that this was the fact that this was only a 10-second penalty.
Well, Nico Rosberg, who's the 2017 drivers champion, he was Lewis's teammate, won the championship, and then retired like a freaking legend. He was one of the commentators for this race, and he immediately said that it was so obviously intentional that Max Verstappen should have gotten a black flag and been disqualified from the race. And if you're curious about what a black flag is and why it's so significant, we have an F101 episode on flags, on penalties. It's definitely worth checking out because a lot of it was very, very relevant in this race. We've seen all kinds of flags, all kinds of incidents this season, but this was certainly the most egregious. And then, so Max winds up after the restart, like you said, dropping from 3rd to 5th. So he's obviously frustrated about that, but that contact takes him from 5th to 10th, nearly out of the points. Red Bull gets 1 point. It is the worst team scoring Red Bull has had since the race before Max Verstappen moved up to the senior team at Red Bull. So since 2016, it is bad. I mean, the strategy and communication was terrible. Some of the worst we've seen from Red Bull.
The strategy wasn't horrible up until that point. Like, they were going to do a 3-stop and it was going to work out great.
Well, it's like really interesting because people are like, oh, well, like the 3-stop was working really well. Like he was right on the back of the McLaren, so much so that people were even questioning if Max should have just stayed out when the McLarens pitted during the safety car and tried to hold them off. Maybe it would have worked, maybe it wouldn't have, but you wouldn't have been in the position of trying to hold off people. But we talk about, everybody wants to see overtakes. Everybody wants to see all the drama on track. But to me, this highlights why strategy is so important because the 3-stop works really well. But if something like this happens at the end of the race, you are out of tires. Like you are out of useful tires for the race. And so, yeah, you could say woulda, coulda, shoulda. If his aunt had wheels, she'd be a bike. Max's comment from Miami last year. But that's the type of thing. That is the power, if you will, that the team strategists have of how many different permutations and butterfly effects they have to keep in their mind because that strategy might have been perfect, but if there's no room for error and then that safety car throws the wrench in all of it, all of a sudden they become the ones who lose out the most even before the penalty. And then the penalty is like the real kick in the pants of like, you've just gone from like salvaging something but being frustrated to completely transforming your own championship prospects, your team's constructor championship prospects. Like so much changes off this one incident. And of course, long season, a lot of things happen, but this feels very pivotal.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed way too, um, I guess, intentional out of Max in that those final moments with George. Um, I think that there's frustration that's boiling underneath the surface there, and the team is not performing like they should. I have my kind of takes on the race that we'll get into in a bit, but uh, I think larger picture, this is not Red Bull's year. And to Josh's point with his hot take last week, Ferrari's jumped into the clear
Yes,
P2.
sir.
they're not close to McLaren, but
Yes, sir.
but no, I mean this is such a big gap from those first few races where you guys got me into watching, where I was like, okay, Max is gonna win. Who's gonna be P2? I mean, you might as well erase the top of the leaderboard and watch for the rest of the race. And now you watch Max act out of frustration, make mistakes. Yuki's not performing, and it is not a good look for the team.
I mean,
it feels like Red Bull's been like struggling under the surface for the past like year and a half. Christian Horner's had his scandals. There's kind of been a ton of talent leaving the Red Bull factory, going to other teams to work for them. And it feels like they're kind of just being held together by Max just being a really good driver, and like he might leave if he's so unhappy.
I mean, that's the saying across all sport, right? Is winning solves all problems. Like, people are talking about, even before Checo started to fall apart last season, they're like, Checo was saying this was a problem, but Max was so dominant. And it wasn't even just that Red Bull was so dominant. It was the other teams just couldn't keep up, that it just, covered the cracks, if you will. But, I don't want to be as definitive as just say like, oh, McLaren is the only one competing for the Drivers' Championship between Oscar and Lando. But we've talked about this year. We talked about in the preview, tracks that suit the Red Bull. Japan, Max won. Imola, Max won. This was another one that Max was, okay, maybe it wasn't a guarantee to win. Nothing's guaranteed to win. But people were talking about him being a high podium contender. This was a track Red Bull needed to do well. Oscar Piastri is now basically 2 race wins ahead of Max. I don't know the exact number, but it's close to 50 points. And it's long season ago. We just passed the 1/3 of the way mark. But McLaren's good everywhere. Red Bull failed to capitalize on a track that should suit them. And even worse than that, they did extremely poorly. It's now looking very bleak that Max can even claw himself back into the championship at this point.
Well, especially with the regulations changing for next year's, I think most of the teams are going to give up working on this year's car like within the next few races, probably not bring any huge upgrades the second half of the season, just to focus on 2026. So I think we're getting to a point where the pecking order is what it is. You're either going to be good at a track or you're not. And McLaren are going to be good, and
I think everyone else felt that way. I know I'm hogging the mic over here, but I think I felt that way a couple races ago when McLaren really started to expand their gap. But I think that this race actually makes me feel the opposite, because we're starting to hear things like Matteo Binotto, who's, at Kick Sauber, he's part of the, heading up the Audi project into next year. He's starting to say, engine development takes time. We don't know if our engines are going to be that great for the first couple of years we're in Formula One. You've got an 11th team joining in Cadillac, and so all of a sudden, getting higher up the ladder, you got to be better than one more team. Part of me thinks like, and the greatest example is Kick Sauber and Nico Hülkenberg getting P5 here, is in some ways, maybe not for the front running teams that have the money, but the midfield teams that are still competing, still relatively close to each other, one good weekend can make a difference. Like, nothing is guaranteed in 2026. Like, just because you put all your eggs in that basket, if all of those eggs are rotten, then you're shit out of luck, not just for this year, but not next year, but maybe even the entire next regulation. Like, it really could have such long-lasting effects. You see somebody like Kick Sauber brings a comprehensive package. Nico Hülkenberg out in Q1, moves up to P15 to start the race because of Lance Stroll's exit, but makes up 5 spots in the race or on the first lap, and then another 5 in the race, all the way up to P5. They catapult from last to 8th in the constructors. To me, now you're not going to see the biggest upgrade packages, but this makes me think that there's still a lot of value. The field is so close right now that just a couple upgrades can move some of these midfield teams ahead of one or two of their opponents, which translates to a 10, 20, $30 million in constructors money at the end of the season.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was a
Would you
perfect
give up
point.
10, 20, $30 million for the possibility of being one of the top teams for the next 5 years?
But I mean, does Kick Sauber, does Aston Martin, like, do they really think that they're going to catapult all the way to number one next year? Nothing is guaranteed in the sport. And so at some point, you have to cash for your sponsors even. You have to cash a little bit of the money while you can, while you have some control that you know about.
Yeah, and if you watch back on Drive to Survive, you can see the tension between some of the teams and their sponsors. And to be honest, I have to agree, Ben, that pushing for this year's success is absolutely vital. And if not if not before, then now for sure, because you know how much time is left for some of these teams. How long is it before we go back to 10 teams and Cadillac is still there, but somebody else has dropped off because they decided that they're going to save themselves for 2026. They got no momentum and they didn't even have the money to maybe even put into the R&D that they need to be successful in the new regulations. So
I think
I didn't even think about that, but
I think I heard the stat after Q1 that the difference between getting knocked out in P16 and being in P7 in Q1 was 0.2 of a second. And so it's like, in Formula One terms, that's a lot of time, but it's also not a lot of time. It's a lot in that will totally change where you are in the weekend, where you start the race, where you finish the race, all of that. But at the same time, one upgrade package, a couple upgrades that get you a 10th or two could be the difference of no points to bagging P7s, P8s, P9s week in, week out. We saw Alpine last year double podiumed in the crazy rainy race in Brazil last year, and it jumped them like 3 constructors' positions in one race. Kick Sauber basically had that with Nico Hulkenberg today. Of course, again, a lot of season ago, but they jumped 2 constructor spots because of one good performance. And so there's still a lot of value on the table. And speaking of that constructor's value, I'm getting right into my track take, is Red Bull dropped from P2 in the constructors to P4. And that's not including Max's penalty. Even if Max finishes 5th, even if Max finishes 4th, Red Bull drops 2 spots in the constructor standings to P4. I think they are not at any point in the season going higher than P4 for the rest of 2025. Mercedes has been struggling recently, but George Russell has been putting in results, on par with Max, and Kimi Antonelli has been bagging some decent points this year. And then Ferrari is finding their form. They still got a little work to do, but they're starting to grab some more consistent podiums. Lewis is starting to pick it up a little bit. When you have 2 decent drivers in the fight, you're going to beat Red Bull and just Max alone every time. And I was doing some research. P4, if they finish there, which is likely because the midfield is well behind them, that would be Red Bull's worst constructor finish since 2015, the year before Max got promoted to the senior team, which means that this would be the worst constructor's finish for Max in his career. And that's bad. We thought it was bad. We were talking about how bad it was last year when Red Bull was in P3. They just dropped to P4, and I don't think they're clawing at all out of this hole.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to give that a green flag. I think it's a bunch of competent teams against a team with only one driver. Yuki, I would love for him to do better, but he's kind of been struggling. I'll probably talk about him later. And yeah, I just don't think there's a way they can keep up with Mercedes and Ferrari unless Max goes on an absolute tear, but I don't really see that happening either.
And I have to green flag that as well. I mean, it's just, I think it's unfortunate not for me, but because I'm a McLaren fan, but it's unfortunate to see that a team can be so hung in the balance on one driver. And even if they only have one driver to actually carry the team, he's not performing. So what does the future of Red Bull look like? I kind of envisioned in my head earlier, like, what would Max look like in a papaya or a Ferrari red? Like, because seriously, like, how long is this sustainable? How long
We
is
don't
he
want him.
going to?
We have two
Yeah,
good drivers.
I don't think we want him either.
I mean,
But
depending on
just
how their
think about
engine
it.
depending on how their engine program goes for the new regulations. Like everybody talked about, last year and the year before, kind of the resurgence of McLaren after some rough years. Everybody was calling Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes the big three, and now it's the big four because McLaren has joined the picture. If Max doesn't have the car underneath him and Red Bull is just cracking all around him, do they drop out of the big four? Do we go back to a big three that is Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren?
Maybe he'll get promoted to VCARB.
You could only hope.
I hope Isaac Hadjar doesn't demote himself up to Red Bull. That'd be crazy.
Well, we talked about Max being one penalty point away from one race suspension. Maybe Red Bull's just say, hey, pick up the suspension. We'll just get a free check on see how Isaac Hadjar is doing. But at this rate, depending on how Yuki's doing, I have to imagine that Isaac is the front runner for the second seat next year.
Well, that goes right into my track take. I think that Hadjar will not only get more points than Yuki and his own teammate combined, which he already does have. I think he's 21 points and Yuki is 10 points. Lawson is 4 points.
Correct.
But I think he'll get more than any other rookie. And to be honest, coming into the season, I thought that Kimi was just killing it. And yeah, he has 42 points. So Hadjar has a lot of ground to make up. But if you look at the momentum of the last few races, I think Hadjar not only has the skill and showing the momentum to be the best rookie of the year, but pass even his own team's expectations as to who is like, because that's the team with 4 drivers, right? He might be the number 2 driver. He's not going to be a number 1, but if he gets a close second to Max, it really begs the question of what in the heck Red Bull has been doing this year, because they're on their second driver, and what would they put Hadjar in this year? Probably not, to save face, because why would you go for 3 second drivers? But what are they going to do next year? Is Hadjar going to want to stay there? Will he be Max's teammate and perish like the rest of all of Max's teammates? But yeah, I think he's just going to kill it this year.
I'm going to have to yellow flag that because I don't think he's going to outscore Kimi Antonelli. I know he's really far behind. I think Kimi's going to adjust to the car, do really well. I do think he'll outscore both Lawson and Tsunoda. And he maybe will be like the best relative to expectations of any of the 4 Red Bull drivers. Because Max we obviously expect to be the best, and the rest of them are all struggling. So, I don't hate it, but I think Kimi's going to do too well for that to completely happen.
I have to go yellow flag as well, because what it really seems to be right is I think Kimi Antonelli's ceiling is the highest, and especially in a Mercedes, they get their setup right. We've seen, crazy race to start the year, but Kimi Antonelli P4 right off the bat to start the year. I think it's hard for Isaac Hadjar in a V-carb to pull in a result like that, but it's against Isaac Hadjar's consistency. He's making it into Q3 pretty much every session. He's last 4 or 5 races, he's finishing in that kind of P5 to P9 window, and he's just always bagging consistent points for a team that is a lot less expectant of strong results compared to Mercedes. So I think the problem, right, is, Isaac might bag 6 points, 6 points, 6 points, 6 points every race, but if Kimi Antonelli just comes out and has a 12-point race here or there, a 10-point race here or there, that might be enough, especially because he's doubled up his score right now to keep in front. But it's interesting, the thing you said at the end, of what does Isaac Hadjar do? Everybody is, it takes a lot of work to get to Formula One. I think because, next year there'll be 22 seats, but right now only 20 seats. You'll take any seat you can get. You can see that. You'll do anything to stay in the sport. But when you look at, the Alex Albons, the Pierre Gasly's, the guys who really struggled next to Max and Red Bull, but are proving themselves as very strong midfield drivers on other teams, it does beg the question, do you get out early the way Oscar Piastri jumped from Alpine to start his career at McLaren? Can Isaac Hadjar use these results to, jump to, be one of Cadillac's first drivers, or, jump to Williams in a year if Carlos Sainz leaves? Do you get out while you're ahead before, like we saw Liam Lawson is like still recovering his confidence. I mean, I think Hadjar is a better driver than Lawson, but I mean, Red Bull looks like it ruins drivers, and it's not just makes them look bad; it makes them feel bad. All of that. So, yeah, I'm going yellow flag, but Isaac Hadjar to me so far has been the most impressive of the rookies.
Yeah, those are totally fair. My thoughts on him surpassing Kimi is that it's possible, not that it's likely, but I do have to say, it's all with a grain of salt. He's up there. I think that we can all agree on.
The other trick, right, is Kimi Antonelli has 2 DNFs in the last 3 races because of mechanical failures. So, and they haven't been his best races. He wasn't doing the greatest in Spain. He really struggled in Imola. Obviously, he was dealing with a little extra pressure of his first home race in Formula One. But at the end of the day, like, who knows? He could still be 4, 5, 6, 10 points further up the standings than he is even now if he has a little more reliability in his car. So it's not all on Kimi, but he needs to find his mojo back a little bit right now.
Oh yeah, and we don't get points for these. This is all pure speculation.
Okay, I have some trivia for my track take for you guys. You guys are both McLaren boys. What do Oscar Piastri, Lewis Hamilton, and Ayrton Senna have in common?
They are the only McLaren drivers to podium at least 8 times in a row.
Yeah, so Oscar is in some good company there, and my track take is that Oscar is going to be an all-time great of Formula One. I think he'll get I don't want to say, I think he'll get 3 world championships at least, and I think he has what it takes to just be dominant for years to come, especially if the McLaren stays as good as it is right now.
I would say I'm going to green flag this, except for who knows, like if the regulations change, it's good to see as a McLaren fan. It's really great to see McLaren capitalize, get the constructors last year, and seem to be leading both championships comfortably this year, because Formula One can change so quickly, especially with the regulation change, that who knows, McLaren I'm sure will still be at least decent, especially getting Mercedes power units, which are usually the strongest of the field, but there's no guarantee, like we were talking about earlier, there's no guarantee with a regulation change that McLaren being the best team by far here, nothing is guaranteed. But I green flag everything else, and I think that part of the media narrative of Lando's losing it, Oscar, I think if you look up to the end of last season, I think it's very valid to say McLaren has the best car, Lando's the better driver, he's got to be the championship favorite. And I think that people for a second didn't keep following the line on the graph of Oscar's trajectory, because he was, not to the level of Lewis or Max, but Oscar was hailed as a pretty exceptional talent, a pretty generational talent, managed by Mark Webber, very successful Formula One driver. He's been touted, third person to ever win F3 and F2 in their rookie seasons, comes straight up, gets, a sprint win in his first season, his rookie season, obviously bags a couple wins in his second season. I think people thought that Lando might have the edge for another season, another 2 seasons. But like I was saying on a recent episode, I think Oscar's trajectory always was going to pass Lando. I think we're just still being surprised that he's hitting it in season 3 so young, which, like you said, opens the door to, if McLaren stays good, he could go on to be one of the winningest drivers in the sport's history, which will be interesting to see.
Oh yeah, I think Ben, you covered basically everything I could think of. This is just he's a fantastic driver, And Josh, Ben, y'all hit the nail on the head. Green flag for me.
Is he officially the McLaren number one?
No,
Is
no,
Lando
no,
second
no,
driver?
not officially, but I don't think he's far from it.
See, the thing that's interesting, right, is I think that at least for now, they seem to get along well. Like the dynamic seems to work. You're only this dominant, in both championships if they're pushing each other like they are this season. I think the sooner you say, "Oh, this guy's our number one," the more likely the other one starts looking for the door. Not because they're a bad driver, not because they can't hang, just because if you're in the same
Nobody
car,
wants to be a number two.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but especially if you're in the same car, how are you supposed to beat somebody who has the slight edge on you? But I mean, so far, McLaren has the spoils in the sense that both drivers seem relatively happy. I was saying to some friends who watched the race with me, obviously I'm a Lando fan a little bit more than Oscar, but I'm a McLaren fan first. I feel like this is shaping up to potentially be the perfect season because Oscar seems to be the one who has the edge for the championship. But he gets that. Lando pulls off like a career win, like a Monaco win this year. I think both drivers wind up looking back on what could turn out to be a pretty dominant season for the team and feel good about their seasons. I mean, Lando, like we've talked about before, dragged this team out of the mud. Like he is earning the plaudits that he worked very hard for. Oscar comes in a little bit later and is now taking them to the next level. It's working out for both so far. Hopefully it stays that way.
Both Oscar and Lando would be 1-2 in the constructors standings right now, which is how dominant they are. Both of them, each of them individually has more than Ferrari in the actual
we were saying
P2
that
right
we were
now.
saying that with Max in 2023. He won the constructors championship by himself as well.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, both drivers are absolutely on a tear right now.
But I think it's time to kick it to maybe some of the other drivers who are absolutely killing it. It is our top and our flop. Of course, we start with the top. Matt, we will bounce to you. Who stood out or what stood out to you this weekend?
My favorite German driver, Nico Hulkenberg. I just we've talked about it already. It's hard to even come by words that would explain how Nico could finish in the top five, and it's not like he was just handed that. He powered his way through, passing. What was it, like lap 64 or something? He
65,
passed,
second to last lap.
yeah, past Lewis, and just he gained 5 positions on the opening lap. Yeah, taking Stroll out of the race did give him 1 extra position, but no, go Nico. Like I really thought that his move to Sauber was going to be the end of his career because it was just, I mean, you look at them last year, just miserable team. And I think he's showing glimpses that there's hope for Audi, and he's not done either.
I mean, he's never podiumed in his career. So, I mean, a P5 to him, I mean, this goes down as one of his best drives in his career. No doubt.
Yeah, it's a Nico podium.
And certainly, that is true. And certainly not also, a race of his career, but certainly the race of his season. I'm giving my top to Fernando Alonso. If it wasn't for Max's penalty, I get my P10 prediction right of him getting into the points, but it's even better that he gets P9. He gets twice the points. But to do it in front of your home crowd, he had a great qualifying. I know he goes, he's celebrating, he's happy with it, team's happy with it, and then obviously the second round of Q3 runnings kind of drops him from P5 to P10, but how Aston Martin has looked this season, getting into Q3 is certainly a feat. Lance Stroll, before he withdrew, only qualified in P14, but I think the thing that was more impressive, the thing I really liked, is he ran into the gravel early in the race. Took him way out of the points. I mean, Alonso fought up, started in the points, fell out, fought back into the points, fell out again, fought back. He was fighting all race. And somebody asked him after the race, one of the reporters asked him when he ran into the gravel, like why he didn't just like throw in the towel there, like give up there, just, park the car, safety car comes out, all of that. And I really respect it. He said, family, fans and families like come out and pay a lot of money to see these races, to see their heroes drive around the track. And you always have to try your hardest. You always have to work hard. And I think we had similar sentiment when Oscar Piastri ran wide in his home race, went from P2 all the way down. He fell out of the points, got back into P9 as well, I believe. But I mean, Oscar could very easily have stalled out in the grass or just given up in the grass, and he fought back, wound up getting a couple points, and that could have changed some of the momentum at the beginning of the season. But Fernando does the same, and then even better when you're really not having the season you want, to get your first points in front of the home fans. It's got to feel special for him. He deserves it.
That's great. That's nice. I thought about going with him, but I went with Charles Leclerc. Started in 7th, didn't have a great Saturday, ends up getting on the podium, finishing 3rd, and just a really well-executed race all around. Perfect strategy. Ferrari did not have the fastest pit stop this race, as we usually do. It actually went to Kick Sauber.
It was Kick Sauber's fastest pit stop ever.
Wow.
But
which is crazy given their issues with pit stops at the beginning of last season.
You gave us McLaren fans a little trivia. I'll give you a fun fact in return, you the Ferrari fan. I didn't realize this is Charles Leclerc's first podium at the Spanish Grand Prix. He had never podiumed at this track before, so certainly a performance, especially to fight for it at the end with the key overtake on Max. But like you said, he actually was kind of like Fernando Alonso. He didn't put in a final run in qualifying. He apparently had set his car up more for the race and just kind of did a good enough lap, and the team was happy with it. And for him to fight back, it certainly worked. Definitely a deserved first podium. Mm-hmm. But then there's also some people who didn't do too hot this weekend, not deserving of a podium in the race or in our review episode. Josh, going right back to you. Who was your flop?
I mentioned it earlier. It's got to be Yuki Tsunoda. He had an absolute abysmal qualifying, finishing dead last, and he's done. I hate to see it because I like him, but he's done.
Yeah. I mean, I went with his teammate, and I guess we can kind of tag team it and just say that Red Bull is kind of a flop in this race for the average fan. Max's behavior towards the end of the race, colliding with George, unnecessary. His race wasn't good. Yuki's wasn't good. Who is there to perform for what is supposed to be one of the best teams in F1? So yeah, Max is my flop.
I would say it's crazy that Max is like, it makes sense now that he's so polarizing, because 99.9% of the time he is the best of the best, and that 0.1% he is the worst of the worst. Not just because, not in like, oh, he's just bad on the track, but like some of the danger he causes, some of the risk he takes.
The clip of George Russell in Abu Dhabi last year.
Yeah.
The interview after the race where he's like, when Max doesn't get his way, he is dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, but
did you see the onboard cam for George on that hit at the end?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's like we said.
Max is basically like
we said, it could have been even worse than it was. It still was pretty egregious, and you don't want to see in a sport that, again, we have to remind ourselves, like the worst days in this sport are deaths and like very serious injuries, not lost games, cut contracts kind of thing. Like, it can be a lot more serious than that. So there's no place in the sport for intentionally crashing. But I'm flopping a different team that somehow had a good weekend, but it was even worse, and that's Alpine. Alpine, Pierre Gasly, he gets P8. He gets much needed points for the team who had been struggling. It was their first points in a while. But even when they're doing well, everybody around them is doing even better. Alpine drops all the way to the bottom of the Constructors' Championship. They're now in 10th, behind now both Kick Sauber and Haas.
And Aston Martin. So it's, I mean, they're, even when they have a good weekend, they just seem to be kind of screwed. And they've really, I mean, they got lucky like we talked about in Brazil last year, but they are looking like the worst team. And every race that goes by now, I keep questioning, it doesn't seem like there was a lot of upside for replacing Jack Doohan with Franco Colapinto. I mean, I guess maybe the upside is the finances, the sponsorships that might have come with it. But
We've seen some crashes from Colapinto. I mean, he only finished ahead of the two Haas's of the cars that finished down in P15, while his teammate Gasly, like we said, getting P8. He hasn't had a single race yet where I've said, "Oh, Jack Doohan couldn't do that." I think Jack Doohan was either on par or slightly better, and we got to start seeing something from Colapinto, or again, this is going to be another shambles season for Alpine.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of both drivers and what we've seen in their entirety of their F1 career, Colapinto obviously has the higher ceiling, but their floor is the same. And if they're performing only at the floor for both of them, then really what is the difference?
We will just have to wait and see. It is the end of a triple header, so there is a little bit of a break. Before we wrap it up, though, Josh, you got a little Predictors Championship update. You had a lot to make adjustments to.
Yeah, I was once again absolutely dominant. I tied the best predictions of the season. I had 6 points because I got all three of the podium and the hot take right. I was the only one to get the hot take right. You two both got 2 points. All three of us predicted Piastri to win. Ben, you got Lando Norris in second. Matt, you got Piastri on pole. And J9 had 1 point. So now the final standings, me growing my lead out in front. Matt, you're in second. I have 23. You have 16. And Ben, now you've tied up last place with 11. So you're gaining a little bit of ground.
Even Red Bull can't be tied P3 in their championship.
I'm looking like McLaren right now.
Have I outscored myself from last season?
Yeah.
Let me check. You're probably pretty close.
Yeah. Hey, I might not win this season.
Hey, you're on that Oscar Piastri trajectory.
No, last season you scored 60 points, and this season you got 16. But there's a long season.
Whoa.
I think we were all collectively a lot better last year than we've been so far this year.
We all have to step it up for the sake of the fans. Come on.
The races are in a slightly different order. So at the Canadian Grand Prix, which is one race after the Monaco Grand Prix last season, Ben, you were leading with 37 points, and I have 23 that I'm leading with.
Generational,
so,
they called it.
That being said, we used to predict the top 4 of qualifying.
True.
So there were a lot more points up for grabs.
But certainly a better performance for Matt. We will have to see who has better performances, who shines in Canada. As we mentioned, they're flying from Europe to Canada, so there is a week off in between. And then Josh and I head up to the great country to the north. It will be our first Formula One race in person. It will be so exciting to see. And we get to see Max Verstappen, which I didn't realize how at risk it was of maybe not seeing him. We'll see if we see Lance Stroll, but it's certainly going to be a blast. Before we hop on our planes, we will get you that preview episode for the next race, but keep paying attention to the season. The drivers' battle is only heating up between Lando and Oscar, and there's still a little feistiness elsewhere in the constructors' battle. So be sure to tune into us all season long. We will be here for you. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you very soon. Stay speedy, everybody. Goodbye.